We don't clean up communities just to keep America beautiful. We clean up so Americans can do beautiful things. Every year, we clean up hundreds of millions of pounds of litter and recyclables, plant hundreds of thousands of trees, flowers, and gardens, and deliver $236 million in measurable benefits. We keep America beautiful so Americans can do beautiful things.
Welcome to Do Beautiful Things. I'm your host, Jenny Lawson, President and CEO of Keep America Beautiful. In this podcast, we'll discuss ending litter, the truth behind recycling, and making communities beautiful for people and for a more sustainable future. We'll be talking to industry experts, community leaders, and everyday people who want to do the right thing, including from time to time, my mother. Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something, and I know I will.
Hi, this is Jenny Lawson. Welcome to this special Mother's Day edition of the Do Beautiful Things podcast. With Mother's Day approaching, I've been thinking a lot about how much our mothers and grandmothers shape who we are through their love, their strength, and their values that they pass down to us. I'm watching the lily of the valley grow up in my backyard right now as spring bursts out here in Connecticut, and remembering my grandmother who had a song about the ringing bells of the lilies of the valley. I feel very lucky to still have my mother in my life, and I've come to appreciate her even more since becoming a mother myself. I think it's true what they say, that you don't fully understand all she did for you until you're the one doing it. And I know many of you have heard Sally on the podcast as she and I sorted through what can and cannot be recycled out at her hometown on Kent Island. So if you still have a mom or a mom figure in your life, don't forget to let her know how much she means to you on this Mother's Day. So that brings me to today's guest, someone who really understands the impact of strong women across the generations. Lucinda Robb is an educator, writer, and passionate serial volunteer who founded Kids Giving to help children discover the joy of giving back. She serves on the board of several nonprofits and generously agreed to serve as an honorary co-chair of Keep America Beautiful's Greatest American Cleanup. And this is special for us because as the granddaughter of President Lyndon Johnson and Lady Bird Johnson, Lucinda carries forward a legacy rooted in the strength and vision of women like her grandmother and her mother, women who may have occupied traditional roles as wives, as mothers, but whose impact was anything but conventional. As First Lady, Lady Bird Johnson was a powerful force behind the national beautification movement. She championed efforts to clean up our cities, reduce pollution, and plant wildflowers along highways, helping to make environmental stewardship a national priority long before it was fashionable. From the 1960s until her death, she used her platform to urge Americans to take pride in their communities and care for the places we share. Her legacy continues to inspire the Keep America Beautiful movement. And in fact, we award the Lady Bird Johnson Award for Outstanding Volunteer Service in our network every year. It is the most coveted prize. We feel very fortunate that Lucinda is here with us today, helping to spread the word about our movement and the Greatest American Cleanup. Welcome, Lucinda.
Good afternoon.
Lucinda and I have had the chance to be on a couple of panels together. She joined the Keep America Beautiful conference this year, and we're just so grateful for your participation in the Greatest American Cleanup.
Well, it's been wonderful. I think I've been talking about it all the time because I think it's a fabulous idea, especially when I think a lot of people are looking for inspiration. What can they do in a positive vein?
I think that's really true, especially right now. We have the luck to be working with the Harris Polls, who's doing pro bono research for us. And they talk about this moment as a time of what they call stacked crises, which is there's a lot on our minds. There are many things that Americans are worried about these days. But when you dig a little deeper and you ask them, how do you break that cycle of anxiety and worry, and how do we build more optimism? it comes down to wanting to serve their communities and wanting to be involved in this idea that when you get outside in nature and you focus on your environment and your community, it sort of refreshes you. It refreshes all of us.
I think that's true. And it's actually something I've been fascinated by for some time. I was recently a moderator for a panel. It was based on Join or Die, which is a Netflix documentary that came from the research that Robert
Putnam
at Harvard did 25 years ago. He wrote a book called Bowling Alone. And he was talking about what happens when we sort of give up our social capital, when we start retreating from all the ways that we volunteer and contribute and work together. And was there a pattern? And yes, there was. And how is this making us feel? Terrible. The nice thing about the documentary is you can watch it on Netflix, and it's a little less than 2 hours as opposed to reading a 500-page book. But it does a really good job of saying this is where the information comes from. And just at the end, after you're thoroughly depressed about how far we've fallen, he turns around and says, working together, joining up with people, especially people you don't maybe already know, who aren't in the circle that you've always had. That's the way to sort of rebuild this civic environment that's going to be so important to not just our democracy, but our own individual well-beings as well.
Thanks for that. I think it's absolutely true. I sat on the National Commission for Civic Infrastructure, and it really came down to how do we knit ourselves back together when we feel so fragmented these days. Whatever the issue is, it comes back to how do we re-engage with each other in civic life in a really profound way?
Well, you can't see me nodding my head like crazy since this is a podcast, but absolutely. I was just reading something this morning that was talking about Robert Waldinger's work and the Harvard study on well-being. And he has this TED Talk, which is one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. And he talks about, again, having relationships and how you interact with other people. And I guess that's what I really like about what y'all are doing is I think it's easy to say, well, we should be doing this, but it's much harder to figure out, okay, how do I put that in practice? How do I make that really happen? And this is kind of a great place to start. Well, get out of your house and pick up some trash. Think about what you can do in the environment around you.
Yeah.
And it's a great place to start. Anybody can do that.
So it's a great place to start, and maybe we'll take that moment to sort of jump back just a little bit into your family legacy from your grandfather and your grandmother. And my son Patrick is reading the Caro book of your family's history. He's in volume 3, so he's a long way in at this point. And he has, in our conversations, he really recognized your family's legacy of service to community and that sense of engagement in civic life. Is there something there that you think people should need to hear today? Is there a message for us in that legacy?
Well, I think it's definitely what drove both my grandfather and my grandmother. I didn't know my grandfather really at all. I was quite young when he died, but I had 3+ decades of getting to spend with my grandmother, who was wonderful. And up until the very end of her life, she still not only was interested, but really enjoyed being involved in what role she could play to be part of and serve her community. She was very uncomfortable about getting recognition about these things. And I think one of the great insights that she passed along is that you can get an enormous amount of done if you don't care who gets the credit. But it also gave her a real sense of purpose. And I think a feeling that this was something that she was contributing. She talked very often. She would say that she was paying the rent for the space she took up on the planet. She was paying God's rent. And she really believed that. And I think it motivated her, and it also gave her a lot of joy.
I think that's a lovely alliance between, this sense of responsibility, but that's not necessarily a negative, that it is a joyful and giving experience as well when you can participate in your community. When I hear old news clips of her speaking, it seems like she was light years ahead of the rest of the world and understanding what we are beginning to understand today about the importance of beauty and nature to people. She saw the links between beauty as a tool and also a comfort during challenging times for the country. But she didn't like the term beautification.
No, she didn't. I think she was concerned, and she wasn't going to go out and have a fight about it, but she was concerned that it made it too trivial, that people would think this was, oh, isn't this nice? You're putting flowers on something. And it meant more than just a surface image of how something looked. It's more about the bigger environment, literally. She wanted the water to be safe. She wanted areas to be clean. She wanted natural habitats to be able to thrive. She wanted to know that the birds were able to thrive, the native birds and the native plants, and even the native, pollinators, because you're not going to have all the beautiful flowers unless the bugs can survive in an environment. So it was deeper down than just what it looked like on the outside. So she did wrestle with that term, and she would bring it up and she would talk about it and say, well, that's not exactly, and I mean more than that. But she also didn't go to war with it too much because she realized she didn't want to take away from getting people back to the idea of the environment you live in makes such a huge difference. It had made a big difference in her life. Her mother died when she was very young, and she lived out in Karnak, Texas. And I have visited Karnak, Texas, and there's still not a lot of people there. And so basically she was sort of allowed at, age 5 or 6 to run off and spend almost her entire day outside, very often by herself. She used to go swimming in Caddo Lake, and they have alligators in Caddo Lake. Today, parents, we're worried about, you have to have this really great car seat, which has the perfect harness for it. And back then she just roamed around, but it's a beautiful, beautiful place as well. And I think seeing all the wildflowers and seeing nature, they really sustained her through what was a hard and often lonely childhood. Her mother was gone. Her brothers, because they didn't really have schooling past a certain age, her brothers were away at school. Her father was busy. She entertained herself, and she entertained it by being in this beautiful world.
I think that's a powerful message for the moment, and mental health crisis in America is, how wonderful if we can get kids out into nature, right? It's getting to be spring and summer. And, I think my advice is get your kids outside, right? Like pack them a peanut butter sandwich and get them outside.
It is such a beautiful day right now. And, sometimes we go between cold and rainy and miserable to, I live in Arlington, which is in the Washington area. And it is soon going to be plenty hot and muggy and humid, but it is just gorgeous right now. So as soon as we finish this, I am going to go out and take my 2 dogs for a walk because all of us will enjoy it.
Yeah, that's really true. And, I think back to what you were saying about her legacy is there was also an economic and recovery driver in her sense of beautifying communities.
My grandmother was very practical and very pragmatic. She cared about the way that the highways looked, not just because she wanted them to be beautiful. And don't get me wrong, she really cared and wanted them to be beautiful. But she also understood that beautiful highways, you're less likely to have people throwing litter out. People would come down and look at the highways of Texas in the same way that you used to go up north on the East Coast and see the trees in the fall. They call it leaf peeping now. You go see the foliage. And she understood that actually it saved money for the Texas Highway Department if you planted all these beautiful flowers in all these different ways. So she was very pragmatic. The environment made a difference, and it was good on a bigger scale.
Well, and I think, there's tons of data that shows clean and beautiful streets in towns. And, I grew up right there in Arlington, kind of up in your neighborhood a little. And that drive down the Parkway from our houses in Arlington to National Airport and beyond were that legacy of the beautiful tulips in the spring and the cherry trees and the river being clean. It drove tourism and it drove business development for people to visit and be aligned with and see that beauty in what was a pretty desolate place in the 60s and early 70s, right? There was a need to sort of rebirth and reimagine DC at that time. And I think those of us who live there can certainly remember that. And the power of seeing those beautiful places was transformative.
Oh, the GW Parkway is absolutely gorgeous. And I think we've gotten spoiled. We're so used to DC being a beautiful place and having all of the, and I remember, I can't even remember how many years ago, sitting in the audience where President Reagan talked. He was giving a speech and he stopped before he said, well, before I do anything, thank Lady Bird Johnson for all the beautiful flowers. And had she been at the stage, she would have said, there are many, many other people who should have been thanked first. But we're so used to it being this beautiful area and we appreciate it. But it used to be pretty
rough.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading something recently talking about how she got an initiative and it wasn't just planting flowers. It was also trying to get rid of the rat population in a lot of areas that were downtrodden. And every once in a while, I'll see something, they'll talk about tree canopy and the difference it makes when you have trees around. Not only does it help with shade in the summer, but it also helps with flooding. It helps to make a place inviting that people want to be and obviously not mess up. And you can often tell if an area is flourishing and thriving and a place that people want to be is by what is their tree landscape. Like if you don't have a lot of trees, very often it's sort of a depressed and depressing place.
It's really true. And we've had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Bhatnagar out of the University of Louisville, who's a cardiologist who's doing this really interesting study. I guess it's either Louisville or Memphis, that there's a highway sort of right down the middle of town, more or less. And he has taken one side of that highway and planted, along with the Nature Conservancy, massive amounts of trees. He left the other side of the highway as a control group. And then they tested everybody in those communities on either side. And they found that the communities that had received this influx of trees, and big, tall, full-size trees, less heart disease, reduced stress levels, improved health, improved mental health, all of the physical markers of health are improved when there are more trees around.
Oh, I would love to see that study. I'm not surprised. It makes sense, but I'd love to see it. And then I can go around and say, have you seen my study?
Oh, yeah. It's great. And he did a thing on the Today Show and everything. So we'll have McCall, our producer, make sure to include a link to that on our notes for the podcast. Yes, we'll get that out there. I think it's just one indicator of the power that beautification can have. And I think for us, another one that we talk about a lot is a study done with our Keep Indianapolis Beautiful chapter and the University of Michigan that took a, Scrabble, brown dirt, empty lot kind of situation and several of them across town. And they planted trees and sort of set a park in place. And one of the really unexpected outcomes was a reduction in assault and gun violence. And so here is a strategy to reduce that awful experience of gun violence with something as beautiful as planting trees.
That sounds great too. There's a book that I particularly love called The Happy City that talks about how strategies like that and everything from creating days where people can bike to work more easily to the placement of parks and the way that you do landscaping so people feel invested in it versus feeling like, well, I don't have anything to do with that. But all these sort of design that you can put in to cities that make them flourish more.
Yeah, they don't always have to be expensive infrastructure, right? Sometimes, like you said, it's just creating pathways for people to be able to walk more easily or more comfortably or bike to work. All of those things, I think you're exactly right, really can make a difference. So you're a bit of a serial volunteer. So what does that mean to you? What's on your plate at the moment?
Well, I'm on a number of different boards, which I find interesting, and I enjoy them both for the mission and for the other people that I get to meet on them. One of them, I'm on Scholarship America board, and that is the largest private administrator of scholarships in the country. I'm on the National Archives Foundation board. I used to work at the National Archives. And I'm really a history nerd and geek, and I loved working there. So I get to start, oh, this is so exciting. And I'm also on the board for Running Start, which trains young women. It's nonpartisan, but it trains young women to run for office and particularly tries to get them involved at high school and college. And sometimes the best place to start out getting involved winds up being in student government at those ages. And that has been a lot of fun. I did my thesis a million years ago on women's political campaigns and campaign fundraising. And so it's something I've sort of always been interested and inspired by. And then I'm on one called Network to Work, which is about helping people who are underemployed find jobs. And that has been fascinating. And all of them in different ways. I learned something from all of his boards. I sometimes joke, I've been doing this now for 20 plus years, that I'm about halfway to being a good board member. And in other ways, I had volunteered at my kids' schools. I volunteer in our community. I started a group 10 plus years ago called Kids Giving at my children's elementary school to introduce kids to the idea of philanthropy. And, we live in Arlington, so some kids are going to be doing these things just because, their parents sign them up. That's totally okay with that. We've just now started having a chapter in middle school, and ideally at some point I'd like to get it down in high school. But the idea of exposing kids to nonprofits that are in their communities and what they do and knowing a little bit about them. And, if we have 100 kids who have passed through the program, there was 2 or 3 who that becomes their jam. Some kids are going to make the varsity team for a high school sport, but some kids, this is really going to get them enthusiastic in what they're going to want to do. And again, I've gotten to know so many different nonprofit organizations in our area and become involved with trying to set up volunteer activities for kids, which is always a bit of a challenge because you have to balance that with the idea that with some nonprofits, you want to be very respectful of the clients they serve and make sure that you're kind and you don't put them in an uncomfortable position. So it's been fascinating. I've gotten to learn a lot about the philanthropic community in Arlington. And again, the people have been great. I've really, really enjoyed it.
It's interesting, kind of coming back to where we started with Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, and now the new one. I would imagine a program like that, even for those kids where it doesn't catch fire, it exposes them and connects them to what people are doing in their community, kind of what the moral compass of the community is a little bit, and what is expected of them as a citizen, whether they decide to jump in then or later, right? I would imagine a program like that really has a legacy that maybe only the seeds are developing at that young age.
Well, actually, that's our slogan, planting the seeds of philanthropy. So think you didn't even know you were setting that up. Last Thursday at our Kids Giving meeting, we did a recycling piece with Eco Action Arlington. And first we had a little quiz and we asked kids, this is not, you can't get anything right or wrong, but what do you think? True or false, and right or wrong? Or what's the most valuable thing you can recycle? And, are those blue bags safe for recycling that sometimes put recycling? No, they're not. Because the truth is sometimes the best way to learn something is to get it wrong. So we start off with a quiz, and then we have a game where I have curated over the years 2 trash bags full of a wide variety of different kinds of trash. And I've actually gone to the people who do the recycling here in Arlington. I'm sure they thought I was totally intense lady. But I'm like, all right, I want to make sure, would you recycle this in Arlington or not? We've gone through every piece of what is probably about 90 different pieces of trash to make sure, because a lot of people have recycling confusion. But the kids, by making it a game, and we try to, you run, you have to pick something up and decide, and you get a point if you recycle it correctly, but you get 3 taken off if you recycle it incorrectly. And I think somebody could probably make it a better game. And then we did a trash pickup around our school, and it's always interesting the things that you find in a trash pickup, even around the school.
We have kids play a game at Keep America Beautiful, which is a litter bingo game, the same vein. It makes me think we should get together and share our games and get more kids involved, because it's a great way to learn and have fun for kids to play these litter games, and they love it.
I would agree. It's always a popular game. But I would say even their parents, I'd like to get involved, because there's so much recycling anxiety about getting it right. And even as long as I've been paying attention. I will find things in our recycling. No, you can't. Or why didn't you recycle this? This is, an aluminum can. It's so valuable.
We were walking our dogs just yesterday morning, and I was with my husband, and I opened the trash bin in the public park to put the dog waste in, and there were all of these aluminum cans in there, and I was just like, wait, I have to find my gloves. I can't leave. This is just awful. I couldn't let it go. I had to go and deal with it. So this is kind of setting up, the Greatest American Cleanup is all about people coming together, cleaning up some litter, taking pride in their community. Why did you say yes to being the co-chair?
Well, that was really a no-brainer. It's something I'm personally very interested in, and it's accessible. It doesn't require a lot of education. It's not something you have to get 30 other people organized to do at exactly the same time you're doing. You can go outside your house, and we live on a sidewalk that takes you into where a lot of restaurants and bars are in our neighborhood. It's a lot of fun, but sometimes over the weekend, we will have an opportunity to do a lot of recycling of cans. So partly because I think it's a great idea. And also I think there's a real value right now in finding, you talk about knitting together. I think finding those ways where we can find something we all agree on and believe is a public good. My grandmother, so when she left the White House, and she was very relieved, I think, when she left, pretty much the first thing she did was to set up in the Texas Department of Transportation, set up a special award for I can't remember, the 60 plus different sort of areas in Texas that are responsible for the highways. But for that district that did the best job of planting native plants and promoting, beautiful highways. And not only did she get involved in this, she personally, out of her own pocketbook, wrote checks to all of the winners, and she had a backup prize too, and she invited them to her ranch for lunch. So it made it a very desirable, it started off in 1969, it's $1,000, and my grandmother did not like to spend money, but she cared, and it was personally from her. She really believed, and she was correct, that if you do this, you put all these good incentives in, you're going to make a difference. So she let other people get the award, and they did the work, and it was great. But that was the way she could, put her thumb on the scale to get it to actually happen, getting involved. And I think there's something powerful about giving people a way in to get involved. So just giving a name to it. This is what we're going to do. This is how you can get involved. This is pretty easy. I think what y'all have done is a real benefit to the country as a whole. And again, it doesn't matter if you're in Vermont or Arizona or Washington State or Florida or Indiana, there are beautiful areas. There is trash. You can get involved. There's a way for you to participate. And I think there's something just wonderful about that. And having spent 10 years trying to come up with good volunteer activities, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fabulous.
Well, on that note, Lucinda, thanks so much for doing beautiful things and for joining us today on the podcast. Thank you for all that you're doing for the Greatest American Cleanup.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Lucinda, thanks again for joining today and for sharing your energy, your memories, and your insights into creating beautiful places and spaces in Arlington, in DC, and how we can all do that in communities around the country. Your grandmother's legacy continues to blossom in the work you do, and we are so grateful to have your voice and leadership as part of the Keep America Beautiful family. To everyone listening, whether you're a mom, a grandmother, or someone who's been shaped by the love of one, thank you for planting the seeds of kindness, service, and care that make our communities stronger and more connected. And to all the sons, daughters, and partners out there, don't forget to make this Mother's Day count. Show up, say thank you, give that hug, write that card, maybe even plant some flowers together. And yes, Patrick, Emma, and Grace, that includes you. Happy Mother's Day, and let's keep doing beautiful things together. See you on the next episode.